But I think it's a triathlete or, elite athlete mentality in general.
Mm-hmm.
It's that almost the 80s way, when you're not training, your competitor is, and when you meet him or her in a race, they will beat you. It's that fear that someone else is doing it. And I
Mm-hmm.
think we need to pull back from that, which is very hard because there's industries, but multi-billion-dollar industries based around this. You know, look at yourself. Everybody's an individual. Find what works for you, and there is that optimal solution for you that might not be what Jan Frodeno does or Craig Alexander did, or some other Olympian, but it works for you. And in the end, you can only do what's good for you to be the
Mm-hmm.
best you can be.
This episode of the Smart Athlete Podcast is brought to you by Solpri, skincare for athletes. Whether you're in the gym, on the mats, on the road, or in the pool, we protect your skin so you're more comfortable in your own body. To learn more, go to solpri.com.
Welcome to the Smart Athlete Podcast. I'm your host, Jesse Funk. My guest today has a slew of certifications. I unfortunately can't get through them all because it may take up the whole hour. But he has level 2 certifications from USA Cycling and US Master Swim, as well as level 1 certifications from USA Triathlon and USA Track and Field. Welcome to the show, Marco Nicoli.
Hi, Jesse. Great to be here.
Thanks for joining me, Marco. We've been talking for a little while before we got going. As a little bit of history, we're definitely going to get into what you did. So I had you a while ago write some kind of, I'll say, research papers almost on ground contact time for the website, and I was atrociously late on getting them out, partially because I was like, people need to see these. There's a lot of good information here, and I wanted to save them, but that was a dumb approach. So I apologize for that.
No worries.
So let's just jump right into that ground contact time. We'll kind of give it. So for anybody watching on YouTube, I will have links down in the description, so you can jump to those articles. If you're on SoundCloud, probably have a link there. On iTunes, you may have to Google for this. So you Google Solpri, Solpri, and then Run Like a Pro. It's a 3-part series from Marco. So you kind of came up with this and almost, I'll say, pitched this to me. Where did kind of the thought of pulling data about ground contact time come from?
Well, it was a kind of an organic thing. I started running with Power a while back, maybe 2.5 years ago when the Stride Pod first came out. I'm a data geek to start with. I've just always been that way.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, let's see what this generates. And after running with it for about a year, I was amazed at the amount of information I could glean from my own data, things that I never even thought about. And then one of the big numbers that I saw was changing a lot was ground contact time. So I started researching it. And just as a little thought experiment to kind of give it away, 3.5-hour marathoners will hit the ground about 78,000 times. If you reduce your ground contact time by 20 milliseconds, that is very small. That's about 6% for the average runner, which is not very much, very possible. You'll reduce your marathon time by over 14 minutes. That is a big amount of time for absolutely nothing more than reducing your ground contact time, which reduces your time, but doesn't increase your O2 uptake or your effort. So it's really for the same fitness, you can run 14 minutes faster in a 3:30 marathon simply by doing some plyometrics or some slight workouts, additions to your regular workouts. So that's where it all started. I'm an efficiency freak, so to speak. So I just wanted to see what can we do to make it better, and what does the data tell me, and how does it correlate with other things? And then the idea just got going, and then I started talking to you about it, and then I crystallized some of my thoughts.
And so anybody that's like a data geek like Marco, he's got like tons of charts with the actual data to look through in the articles. Like I said, they're pretty in depth. There's something you need to like sit down and chew on, really, to digest absolutely everything, which is awesome. So you're talking about plyometrics. Practically speaking, is it just a matter of figuring out how to make that firing sequence faster, or is there like a nice little mental trick, or how do you go through and actually get your athletes to make that small, very almost micro adjustment?
It's a combination of physical and cardiovascular to a certain degree, because your muscle fibers, your type 2 muscle fibers, are the ones that are going to be mostly responsible for that explosive power, that explosive strength jumping off the ground. But on the other hand, a lot of the power that is generated during your stride is also called elastic return, which is essentially your leg is a spring. And when you hit the ground, some of the soft tissues will contract a little bit and then spring back out. And that gives you essentially free power, free energy to propel yourself forward. And the plyometrics and explosive workouts will mostly target that aspect to basically give you that free energy, free return. Then, of course, you have that higher ability to sustain fatigue with your fast twitch muscle fibers. But all of it is a pretty straightforward training program. It just takes a little bit of time because you want to make sure you don't affect your body in a negative way. These are very high intensity, damaging workouts. Little goes a long way. And the biggest problem I have with my athletes is they do too much.
I mean, I feel like that's pretty much par for the course, especially when we're talking about, I assume, mostly triathletes that are working with you. You know, I think we're prone to think more is better, especially because we're like, oh, it's a long distance event. So the more I can do, the more prepared I am for this, this period of time. But it is always a balancing act between your current fitness, future fitness goals, and straddling that line so you don't get into, overtraining.
And, having tested that on myself and putting myself in the hospital with overtraining, trying to see how much volume I can possibly take, I want to avoid that for anybody. I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. And, going back to the more is better, there's only, once you can ride 112 miles and run 26.2, there's no prize for running 75 miles off the bike or riding 600 miles. You're just trying to get that particular distance as fast as you possibly can. And more is not always better in that respect.
Mm-hmm. So I have to back you up because most of the time overtraining doesn't lead people to be in the hospital. So can you tell me more about what happened there?
Well, I wanted to kind of improve as a triathlete. And so I put myself through a 1-year program of, okay, you know what, let me ramp up the volume. And I got up to about 37 to 40 hours a week of training with a fair amount of intensity. That worked very well. So I decided, well, let me see where the breaking point is. Let me just progressively do more and more and more until something happens. I wasn't quite sure what was going to happen, but I figured if I'm going to test this, I want to test it on myself to make sure I don't, do it to anybody else. Mm-hmm. And there is a breaking point. I mean, it's just, in my case, it was almost complete renal failure, endocrine system failure, pituitary gland, no longer working. When you get that message from your doctor, saying, using the words fatal and 48 hours in the same sentence, you kind of start paying attention. But it was a combination of intensity and volume. It doesn't happen in a vacuum, and it doesn't happen very quickly. I mean, you're familiar, and your listeners are familiar with the concept of overreaching, functional overreaching, and non-functional overreaching. You have to go well beyond that to get into the full-blown overtraining syndrome. And there are many, many, many warning signs that you need to blow by and ignore before you get there. So if anybody has any doubt of whether they're overdoing it, take stock, take a step back, and take a look at it, because it's not something you want to go through.
Yeah, I mean, like there's all these kind of safeguards, even just mental safeguards in a normal workout where, like, I can use this is the end of week 2. So I do a 3-week cycle, 2 up, 1 down. This is the end of week 2 for me. So I was in the pool this morning and just feeling tired to start with. And it's like, that's kind of one of the many signals where it's like, all right, your body's starting to ask for recovery time, and unfortunately I know it's coming up. So it's like, I kind of got warmed up and had a pretty good set, but I know at the same time there are people that go, I'm just tired today and I'll push. And then it's the same thing. It becomes in that pattern of, I'm just tired. Like, being tired is just part of the game. I had a teammate in college who, for is other diatribe I won't get into, but he essentially got his meal plan cut off from him on campus. That's a whole story. It wasn't his fault. But basically, he wasn't eating enough, and he was training to run national marathon, and
Ooh,
he's
that's
just
not going to
pushing
work
through
out.
it. And right, so he got to the point where his body basically acted as if he had diabetes. Like,
Wow.
so that he got all kinds of messed up because he didn't listen to a lot of those signals that say, hey, yeah, you probably need to eat when you're putting in 20 miles a day and doing speed work and all these kind of things. And he continued to just try to push it as hard as he can. So, yeah, I think it's tough to get people to the point where they're going to, kind of be in your case, not to pick on you. But I think it's also tough. I think you said that you were working out like 37, 40 hours a week. Like, average
Yeah.
Joe doesn't have that much time to work out to start with, let alone the mental capacity. I know my breaking point, I think I got up to just shy 20. It was like 17, 18 most weeks. And that was about as far as I could go without just being toast like all the time.
Well, you get like you said, you get used to being tired, and that
Yeah.
just becomes part of, I mean, at my peak for Ironman training, I was doing 400 plus mile weeks,
Hmm.
about 70 to 80 mile run weeks, and 25,000 yards in the pool on top of strength training and stretching. So that was just normal. My recovery weeks were 19, 20 hours, and I
Hmm.
thought I felt pretty fresh. But, even beyond the fatigue, I think you need to pay attention to other factors such as lack of appetite, disturbed sleeping, moodiness. I got to the point where I would consume 7,000 calories on average a day and eat about 400. I lost, I'm 6'2", about 180 pounds. I got down to 165 pounds in no time. And, those are things, couldn't sleep more than 1 or 2 hours at a time. You get moody. So there are a lot of ancillary factors that come into play that you need to be aware of. And I find that it really helps to write them down and then kind of have a checklist. If you use training software like Training Peaks or, Today's Plan, they allow you to do all these things and just, hey, you know what? If you check more than two boxes, it's time to pull back and just be aware, because you don't get any faster by bearing yourself. You get faster by resting.
Right. Which is a whole other like industry now. It's like the recovery industry. I talked about. I don't know if you've seen her book, Christy Ashwanden. It's Good to
Oh,
Go. It's on like the whole industry about recovery. I had her on several weeks ago, and she talks about all these different recovery methods and kind of debunk certain things and kind of brings certain things back. Um, I don't know if you've seen this. I'm sure it's probably where you live, but like there was an ad on the radio this morning again for it's like IV fluid replacement recovery,
yes.
and it's like there's that other direction you go where it's that same mentality that says more is better, and then listens to us in this conversation, says okay, recovery is good, more recovery is
It's better.
better, and then starts to do dangerous things like have people that aren't clinically trained to use needles putting IVs in you.
And God knows
Uh,
what's in that IV. I mean, I'm sure
right.
some of it is controlled by the FDA, but I think it's a triathlete or, elite athlete mentality in general. You
Hmm.
know, it's that almost the 80s way, when you're not training, your competitor is, and when you meet him or her in a race, they will beat you. It's that fear that someone else is doing it. And I
Hmm.
think we need to pull back from that, which is very hard because there's industries, multi-billion dollar industries based around this. You know, look at yourself. Everybody's an individual. Find what works for you, and there is that optimal solution for you that might not be what Jan Frodeno does or Craig Alexander did, or some other Olympian, but it works for you. And in the end, you can only do what's good for you to be the
Hmm.
best you can be.
I can't remember who. I don't know if it's Sebastian Kienle or I want to say it's Kienle off the top of my head, but I could be very wrong here. I feel like there's almost like a pissing contest about who can do more miles all the time,
Yeah.
and I think it was Kienle who was like his miles were like way short of what everybody else was saying, and I think if it was him, whoever it was saying well, almost like, oh, should I be embarrassed by that? Like,
No, you're still killing everybody on race day.
yeah.
I mean, I think the Tim DeBoom era was, he was known for the build where 700-mile weeks, 50,000 yards in the pool and 100 miles of running each week for 4 months straight. I would contend that most people that try that are going to, end up quitting the sport within 3 weeks.
Right.
Nobody can handle that.
Yeah. There's a college coach who had the philosophy, not my college coach, fortunately, but in our conference, he had the philosophy of he'd bring freshmen in, and it was, you run 100-mile weeks to be on this team. If you can make it, you make it. If we break you, you're gone. And he didn't care. It wasn't about individualization. It was either you can conform to my system or you can't.
Well, that's self-selection right there, right? I mean,
Right.
I'm going to select, I'm going to bring in 100 people. 3 of them are going to make it, and they're going to be heroes.
Yeah.
Oh,
And it's like, I know for a fact that because he had a pretty big talent pool. So it's like, if you had just stopped and thought about, what the limiters are for each of those individual athletes and kind of tailored their programs, you probably would have had an even more, impressive team because you didn't break so many people.
Well, no, it's, we kind of take it for granted now with all the data that we have and the visibility into the individual abilities. I mean, we can individualize training levels for everybody. I mean, I can look at a power curve and decide, okay, you know what, you need to do 2.5 or 2 minutes and 27-second intervals at X watts for the run. Back then, we didn't have it. So it was, hey, you know what, this is the training program that works. And that's what happened. We will never know how many people, were kind of weeded out because they just didn't have the personalized training that they would have needed. And they could have been much better than, the Olympic gold medalist. We'll never know. I think today we are starting a great era of training and coaching that allows you to personalize things at a level that was until now almost unheard of. You would have to go into a human performance lab with force plates for running or ergometers for the bike to get some of this data. And that was out of reach for most people to spend, $300-400 an hour on a regular basis. But now every workout you do will file through, and all your data is there, and we can just see it evolving in real time.